Okay, so I think we're still waiting for a few people, but I'd like to not delay any further. So I do think there's a few people that had joined, and it looks like there's a bit of a mix of folks from distributor side or from the actual hospital and medical providers. So let me just try and, Lydia, I don't know if you can hear me, but I'll unmute your microphone. And I'd be curious to just hear a little bit more about your role and what feedback you have. And if it's just that you're here to listen and learn, that might be okay. But if you have specific feedback, that would be really excellent. So I'm gonna unmute your microphone and allow you to speak with us if you're interested in that. Okay, looks like we have a few more people that have joined as well. So Lydia, I'm not sure if you were able to have the microphone start working, but again, if you go to the chat feature on the software, I'll send a note right now just so you can see it. If you're able to just provide some feedback on what your role is and if you have any specific questions about the Pumani bubbleCPAP. And it looks like Joseph also just joined. So Joseph, same question for you. We'd love to learn a little bit more about your feedback or your interaction with the Pumani bubbleCPAP. So if you'd like, I can unmute your microphone and you can let us know a little bit more about yourself and your questions. Or in the chat feature on the software, you can actually type in your questions or just a bit more about yourself. And that would be great because before we do the demonstration, we'd like to just know if there's anything specific we should spend more time on. So for troubleshooting that way. So I will try to unmute your microphone, and if that works, that'd be great. And if not, you can just type into the chat section there. So Joseph, it looks like you're
Okay.
connected now.
Yes, I'm connected now. Yeah, my first question is how long should a unit stay on this CPAP bubble? For how long?
Okay. And then have you had any challenges when you've been using it? Have you experienced any trouble with desaturation or any other questions while you've been using it, or has everything been working as expected?
Yeah, actually, it has been working as expected, but at times you have some conditions. You put them on for the first 4 days, it works okay. Then for the fifth day, then the child starts deteriorating. What can you do? Is there a way you can adjust the machine?
Okay, so it sounds like the first question is how long can you stay on the CPAP? The second part I didn't quite hear. You're asking about certain conditions. Can you explain a bit more?
Yeah, I'm talking about when everything is working, the machine is working, but a client is desaturating. Is there any way you can readjust the machine? What can you do?
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll do a demonstration in a few moments, and we can talk about a few of the potential issues that are causing this, and some checks you can do with the device to make sure everything's functioning properly. Perfect. Thank you, Joseph. Appreciate that. So I will put you back on mute for the moment, and then Lydia, if you're available, I'd like to take you off of mute as well and see if you have any specific feedback. So,
hello.
Hello, Lydia. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you too?
Excellent. Do you have some feedback you'd like to share specifically, or if you have any questions that you were interested in?
Yes. So the nasal punks the CPAP machine comes with, sometimes it's a little too long and difficult to fit into the nostrils for the very tiny babies.
Okay.
So it hangs out. So if you don't push the entire length, what happens is that part of it hangs out, so that sometimes you have to kind of support it with maybe a gauze, something between the upper lip and then the nasal prong.
Okay. And which size nasal prong are you using?
The size 0. So if you have for the very tiny babies, it seems to be a little huge on them still.
Okay. And is that the size 0?
In terms of the length, yes, in terms of the length of the nasal prongs.
Okay, so it's the
length. In terms of the length, yes.
Okay. Is there anything else that you've experienced when you've been using the device of any challenges or any questions you had about the function or any features? Oh, sorry, there we go. Have you
Oxygen
back?
knob, before the total oxygen flow, the oxygen knob sometimes doesn't turn if it's connected to a flow meter. But it was explained to me that once you attach it to a flow meter, it won't work, if that is the case.
Okay, so I'm gonna just mute you for now, Lydia, because it looks like your audio is in and out. So if you can type in the questions, what the main issue. So I know you have the one question we had written down about the nasal prongs being a bit too long for the smallest of neonates. So we can discuss that a bit. And then if you have anything else, just feel free to type that into the question section. And it looks like there's a few other people that have joined as well. So I think the easiest thing is if you can type your questions in to the question section and we can answer them one at a time. And that way we can start with the demonstration. And we have do have a few questions that have come up already that we can answer in the demonstration. The first is about how long can a neonate stay on CPAP therapy with Pumani. Second is just about any experiences with desaturation and what things you can check on the device to avoid that. And then the other one was just about the nasal prongs maybe being a bit too long for the smallest babies. So we can touch on that as well. But that might be one where it sounds like it was size 0. Maybe the 000 might be the best option in that case. So we can discuss that as well. But I'd like to open up the demonstration now. So then I'd like to allow the Hadley team that are the product specialists with the Pumani bubbleCPAP to answer some of those questions and do just a quick demonstration. So we have Alexandra actually running the video with the device there. And then we have Danica on the phone that's going to be talking through some of the questions and the demonstration. So if you have questions as we go, please just type them at any time into the question section. That would be extremely helpful so that we can answer your questions as we're doing the demonstration. So I'll let them get started now. And if there's any additional questions, I'll just throw those out to you, Danica, so that you can touch on them as well.
Great, thank you, Brian. Can you hear me all right?
Yep, sounds perfect.
Perfect. Hi, everyone. Glad to be speaking to you. Thank you for coming and for the questions. Always useful for us to know what you need help with and what we can do better to make the equipment better. So just initially, I'll touch on sort of the first two questions before we start the demo. Is that likely both of those questions are actually clinical questions, and that will need to be actually answered by the clinical guidelines in Ghana according to the CPAP protocol guidelines. There's no limitation on how long a neonate can stay on the Pumani versus any other CPAP. It's really according to guidelines and according to you, and what you see is the benefits versus the risk of having a baby on CPAP. But what I can do is, in order to help with those, we can potentially put you in touch with some other sort of clinical trainers that we work with in other countries to talk through the challenges with that. And I'm not sure currently if Ghana has a CPAP protocol in place, but that's something to check on as well. And for the desaturation question, I didn't hear the entire question. I think it was that everything's working fine, and then after a few days, the baby starts desaturation. And if that is the question, I guess it sort of depends on what the clinical use case is for the Pumani and what's happening to that baby. Because for the machine, there's no reason that should happen unless there's something wrong with the external oxygen source. But we'll walk through this, and maybe you'll see some things that would help you better treat the patients for desaturation. And then just in regards to the nasal prong, yes. So there's two things with the nasal prongs. There's one, we do hear feedback that the nasal prongs are too big sometimes, and we do have a smaller size. However, we also have heard, know that it is sometimes difficult to get the prongs into the baby's nose, especially the small babies, but they do need to fill the full nose in order to be effective. So it's not like the free flow oxygen cannula. They actually need to fill the nose. So it's a bit of a different fit than you'd have with the free flow cannula, but I suspect that the size 000 prongs would help with the smaller babies. So we'll just walk through a basic demonstration of the setup steps and the check function steps. So basically, you have the Pumani CPAP in front of you, you can all see. And the first step to do, because it is a bubble CPAP, is to fill the bottle with water. And the usual recommendation is 7 centimeters of water. Anywhere between that green line is okay. And once again, it's according to your protocols in your hospital and in Ghana. So once that's full, you connect it. And then the next step is to connect the tubing, so the inspiratory and expiratory tubing. So you have 2 long sets of tubes, and there are 2 ports. One port is on the, has a baby in front of it, is a baby port, and that's the inspiratory tubing. And only one side fits in there, so you can't mess it up. So you snap that in there, and that's the inspiratory tubing. So that's where the blended air and oxygen go into the baby. And then we have the expiratory tubing, which also snaps in only in one direction into the bottle. And that's where the air, the blended air and oxygen pass out, and it's expired out of the baby and into the bubbler, which then creates the actual pressure, the PEEP. So once you have those connected, you connect the prongs and the fish elbows to that tubing, depending on the size you've selected. And your entire circuit is complete. So you can look at the prongs, the inspiratory tubing, the expiratory tubing, and the fish elbows are all together. Once that's there, you can, before putting on the baby, you turn on the Pumani device. And you open both of the flow meters. And by opening, it's basically turning it all the way to the left, as you see Alexandra doing. And that's important to do before you connect the oxygen or turn on the oxygen, to make sure that that entire pathway is open so the balls will move. And at this point, you likely see that the ball in the total flow meter is moving, but not the one in the oxygen. It's okay if we can't see now, but that's what you should be seeing. And then you can now select your external oxygen source. And so in terms of external oxygen source to blend with the air, which is inside the Pumani, you can use a tank, you can use a concentrator, you can use walled air. It's compatible with any of those. But of course, the percentage of oxygen in your oxygen source will affect how much oxygen the baby is getting. So the Pumani assumes that you're using a concentrator or a tank with a low FiO2 and so a lower level of oxygen. So it assumes about a 94 to 95% oxygen is coming into the Pumani from the concentrator or tank, and then blending with the air made by the Pumani. Most concentrators are about that amount. Most tanks are about that amount. And some walled air systems are higher, but unlikely in your setting that we have 100% oxygen. It's pretty rare in most settings. So in terms of the question related to desaturation, is that the only thing that the machine cannot tell or cannot read or understand by itself is how the quality of your oxygen you're putting in, because it's an external source. So for example, if your concentrator acts like it's working and it's making noise and it's pushing out some sort of air, but something is wrong with the concentrator and it's not pushing up high concentrated oxygen, then the saturations on the babies won't go up, because you're not actually giving them any more oxygen than room air. So that's sort of an external factor. We can look at if at the beginning the babies are not getting, their sats are not going up. So now that you have the flow meters open, the concentrator or tank connected, you can select your FiO2. So you're basically selecting the settings you want to give that specific patient. So room air, so the normal air we breathe is 21% oxygen. And then to get to pure oxygen, you get all the way up to about 100% oxygen. And you need to find in between there the setting that's appropriate for the baby in order to get their saturations up to the recommended amount. And, you know, oxygen is a drug, and so it's dangerous and it can cause harm if too much is given to premature babies, and that's why the use of a pulse oximeter is always recommended. And that's also one of the advantages of using the Pumani CPAP versus just the homemade CPAP, is with the sort of homemade CPAP, as you know, with the water bottle and the syringe and the tubing, is you're giving the baby 100% oxygen. And that can be quite dangerous for them. And so with the Pumani, you have the ability to blend the oxygen with the air and get the amount you'd like while still providing CPAP. So there's a table, and we can go into the table later if there are more questions. I don't know if that's what you're having a challenge with, but we'll move on to that and we can go back. So once you've selected your FiO2, there's a table on the top, and you turn on the concentrator. And then you adjust the knob according to the settings in order to get a certain FiO2, so a percentage of oxygen that the baby's getting. The oxygen knob, the oxygen flow meter, shows how much oxygen is going in to the machine. The total flow meter shows how much room air, so 21% air, is going into the machine. You use the total flow meter to adjust the room air. When you're trying to adjust the oxygen, you should actually be using the flow meter on your concentrator or on your tank to do the adjustment. So each flow meter and each concentrator have a different type of flow meter, but you do the adjustment on there. And then once you have the adjustment on there, which I think is at 3 liters per minute, what Alexandra is doing, and then you check back on the Pumani to make sure, to see what the reading is on the Pumani, on the oxygen flow meter. So basically, whatever it shows on the flow meter, in the last flow meter, so the one on the Pumani, the oxygen flow meter, that is the truth. That's how much flow is coming in through your concentrator. So sometimes, because there's tubes and depending on the back pressure and whatnot, there can be a slight variation between that oxygen flow meter and the one on the concentrator or tank. However, you should use the concentrator or tank to adjust the flow, but what you read on the oxygen flow meter on the Pumani is the actual flow that's happening. And then similarly for the total flow, that is the actual flow that's happening. And the total flow is the end. So the air gets blended and goes to the total flow. And so if you see there, it's at 6 liters per minute. That is how much flow is going out of the patient port and into the patient. And 50% of that, so 3 liters per minute, are oxygen, and 6 liters per minute total. So then there's 3 liters per minute of room air. So it's blended. And that puts us, I think, at about 60%. I'd have to look at the table, about 60% of FiO2. Let's see what that is. Yes, approximately 60%. And so the FiO2 depends on, obviously, the baby's condition, their oxygen saturation levels, according to a pulse oximeter, and of course the clinical signs. And that's according to you as clinicians, is how much FiO2 you want to give them. And you have options from obviously 21%, which is room air, all the way up to almost 100% oxygen with the Pumani. So we have all that going, and then to make sure the whole circuit is working and everything's working, the way we determine that is we need to check the bubbling function. And to do that, you close the circuit. So you'd pinch the prongs as if they were in the baby's nose. And you'll see the bottle will start bubbling. Go closer. And that means that the CPAP there's CPAP being provided to the baby. Because the entire circuit's closed, and that means that pressure, which is there to open the baby's lungs, plus the oxygen air you put in, is actually getting to the baby. So that's the main functionality check. If that is bubbling, then everything in the system's working. And then you would connect to the baby, and it would continue to bubble. And periodically, you'd need to check that it was still bubbling, that the flow meters were still saying what you wanted them to according to your recommended guidelines. And then you would know that it would continue to work. Of course, with anything, you know, water evaporates, electricity goes out, the concentrator might be used by somebody else, the baby might move a bit, the prongs might come out. So it's continuous monitoring and just checking, doing all those basic checks on a regular basis is what's key to giving the effective treatment and having the machine work. So that's the sort of the basic demo, and open for more questions, to go into detail about any of that anymore, or further explain.
Yep, perfect. That was great. Thank you very much, Danica. So I know there's a few people that have joined in the last couple minutes. So one thing we have done is recorded this demonstration and the question and answers. So we can send out the video after the webinar is over. But we have already answered a few questions, and looks like there's a few more that have come in, or at least one more. So if you have specific questions about the Pumani, if you've had any issues, or if you have any questions just generally about the features and functions, let us know. Some of that might have already been covered. But so there was one question just about the specific features of the Pumani, which I think you've already touched on there. So, and a lot of that can be found as well on the product page at the VS site or in the manual, just talking about the function of the device and what features it includes. So the new question that came in is there an instance when the oxygen knob on the machine doesn't move, where it remains at the lowest end when the oxygen source is attached? So I guess when oxygen knob on the Pumani wouldn't move and it remains at the low end when the oxygen source is attached.
Right. So I think what we're getting at is that you attach the oxygen, you turn it on, the machine works, but the bead is not moving in the
Correct.
actual oxygen flow meter. Yep.
That's what I understand.
Right. Yes, so perfect. So if that happens, the most likely issue is that there's a tube disconnected inside of the machine. This happens if the knob on the oxygen flow meter is not open at some point when the oxygen is connected, which is an easy mistake to make, and there's enough pressure, the tube will pop off on the inside of the machine in order to avoid any damage to the pump in the machine. But it's a very, very easy fix. And so maybe, Alexandra, is the machine open? Yeah? No, it is not. She will unscrew the machine. But it's good to look in the machine as well. The machine is this one is very simple inside and doesn't require anything but a screwdriver to basically reattach the tube. We'll show you what that is in a moment.
Perfect. And then Lydia, I know that was your question. So does that explain at least part of what was part of your question? And we're going to show you more here as well, but let us know if it does answer all of your questions after.
Right. So if you look inside, and these tubes are all connected, you'll see that there are 4 tubes on the flow meters going to various places. All of those tubes should be connected. There shouldn't be anything loose that's just hanging in the air. Likely the issue is with the problem you're seeing is that one of the tubes, likely the bottom one on the oxygen flow meter, is popped off. And all you need to do is push it back on, close the machine, and start running it again, and make sure that oxygen flow meter stays open. There is also I think you have it on your site, on the site, Brian, a diagram that shows the different tubing pathways, and they're colored. It can sort of show this a bit clearer, as well as a troubleshooting video that shows you exactly what to do for this problem. And if there was another problem that would cause that same thing, there's also that as well, which could be just be a dirty bead inside the flow meter. But I think that there's a diagram and video in there that will show you exactly what it looks like when it pops off. But don't be afraid to open the machine, check to see that everything's connected, and put it back on.
Perfect. Let me just check and see if there's any new questions. And so again, Lydia, just let us know if that answers your question. You can just type another question if you want to, and let us know if that's solved your problems. And then again, for a few of you that have joined a little bit after the beginning, we've gone through a lot of the demonstration and answered some questions about the features, some challenges with desaturation, nasal prongs, other basic questions, and we went through a demonstration as well of the device. So I will be outputting a recording of this video so we can send it to you after this, but we'd love to just open up any further questions, maybe another 2 minutes, just see if there's anybody else that has a question or if they had a challenge they were hoping to have answered. It looks like we have answered Lydia's question satisfactorily, so that's good. So again, just a few minutes. If anybody else has a question, we'd like to open that up while we have Danica on the line. Okay, looks like we have one new one. Okay, so this is more about is the machine having parts that need to be changed or serviced after a long time? So I know that you have the machine open. It might be a good chance to show some of the spare parts and just talk a little bit about maintenance, I suppose.
One thing I forgot to mention before is we should always unplug the machine before touching anything inside of it, just to be safe, as with any machine. Yeah, so the Pumani doesn't require much maintenance. The number one thing that will keep the Pumani working is to make sure that it's turned on regularly. Because the main things that would go wrong is that due to humidity or dust or just lack of use, that something would get stuck, the beads or something would get stuck inside of the pathway, the air, the tubing. And so basically, number one thing of maintenance is turn it on once a week, check that the flow meters are working and the pump is working. That's sort of the first key thing. And that should keep it going for at least 5 years. That's our current estimate. And then in terms of just regular maintenance, there's two things that we check and recommend or change maybe every year, depending where you are, every 2 years. One is the bottle. The bottle should be cleaned regularly according to your cleaning protocols. It doesn't need to be disinfected, but it needs to be cleaned. And it should always be empty when you're not using it to reduce the potential of anything growing in there or stuff like that. Eventually, the bottle will get pretty dingy and sort of yellowy, and so you want to change it maybe once a year, once every year and a half. The other part that needs to be changed or at least checked is the filter inside the pump. So that filter, when the Pumani pulls in air from your setting and pulls it through a filter, and then it goes into the pump and then to the patient. And that filter just gets out big dust particles to protect the pump. Well, also depending on where you're using it. If you're using it in a higher level NCU that has climate control and closed windows, it will take a lot longer for the pump filter to get dirty. But if you're using it in a hospital that's sort of open air hospital that has more dust, the pump filter will get dirty quite quickly. And so we recommend that you check that pump filter every 6 months and replace it every year. And inside the Pumani is a spare filter, sorry. If you reach inside, there's a bag inside the Pumani that has spares, and there's a few things in there. One is a filter, and you can basically, that goes underneath the pump. There's instructions that you have in the manual on how to change that. We won't go through it now. It takes a few minutes. There's a repair log, and then there's some extra fuses. Just getting them out. In case there's anything wrong, and those go into the power supply in the back. And there is, let's see what else there are, and then there are some screws. So when you open the Pumani, we use standard screws on the outside. However, there's 6 of them and they can be loose. You do have more in there in case you need. And so those are all in there in each unit, ready for you to use to change those things. And that's pretty much the regular maintenance that need to be done.
Perfect. Let me just see if there's any other questions. So I don't see any other questions through. Just to follow on the parts to be changed in services, obviously there's the circuit that the accessory is there. So we do sell that as a complete circuit, a 10-pack. So you can buy that in a variety of sizes so that you have accessories that can be used for a period of time, or you can buy individual. So if you want to just buy a pack of 000 nasal prongs, you can do that, or a new bottle, for example. But we recommend the circuit packs because it's a more complete set and it provides you everything you need to get started. So obviously the device comes with a starter pack, but for longer term use, we do recommend at least one 10-pack when you purchase. So I don't see any further questions. Last minute, anybody else has anything else? Otherwise, I will send this video out after the fact. So I'll give it about 30 seconds if anybody wants to type into the questions section of the software just about what they have a question about, and we can answer that. Or if you want to, there's a little hand icon on your software where you can raise your hand and I can turn on your microphone and you can ask directly. We can do that as well, but I'll just give a few seconds. Okay, doesn't look like there's anything further. So again, I will follow up and send this video out to all the attendees. And if there's anything further that comes up with questions, I'll also include in that email that goes out with the link, email address you can send to us directly to ask any questions about your technical issues or for ordering or for any other details you might have. But thank you everyone for joining, and for Alexandra and for Danica for taking us through this in the morning. And we will follow up with the video, and want to thank everyone for joining.